Human helped the alien girl escape hunters, but her mark bound him as her chosen witness. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The sandstorm rolled across the metal flats like a living thing, a low hum vibrating through the abandoned outpost as Elias Ward wiped the engine grease from his hands. He had been working on a cracked coolant line, listening to the faint rattle of loose panels overhead, when a sharper sound cut through the wind, a hurried step, light but frantic, followed by the soft clatter of something striking the storage door. Elias froze. The storm wasn't supposed to bring anyone out here. The nearest settlement was almost 20 miles away, and people rarely traveled alone on the dunes. He approached slowly, feeling the metallic floor tremble under each careful footstep. When he slid the heavy door aside, a figure stumbled into view, nearly collapsing against the frame. She was small, cloaked in a torn fabric that shimmered faintly, as if catching light that wasn't there. And beneath the hood, he glimpsed skin the color of cool ocean water, dusted with the glowing shimmer of bioluminescent specks. Her breathing was uneven, like each inhale scraped against fear. Elias raised his hands instinctively to show he meant no harm. "Hey, it's all right," he said softly, his voice steady even as the storm wailed behind him. Her eyes, silver, reflective, wide, locked onto his. For a second she seemed ready to flee, but the wind pushed her sideways, and she braced herself on a crate to keep from falling. The hollow thud of something in the distance made her flinch, her shoulders tensing as she glanced back over her shoulder. Elias followed her gaze but saw only the shifting sand. Still, he felt an unfamiliar weight settle in his chest, the kind that came when someone silently asked for help without trusting the words to say it. "Come inside," he said, stepping aside so she could enter the dim shelter of the supply room. She hesitated, then crossed the threshold, pulling the hood tighter around her face. Once he closed the door, the wind's hull softened into a muffled hum. She stood near the wall, watching him with cautious stillness, as though expecting him to turn her away any moment. Elias kept a respectful distance. "You're hurt," he said, noticing the slight limp in her stance. She didn't answer, but she shifted her weight as if trying to hide it. He grabbed a clean cloth from a metal drawer and set it on the workbench, not pushing it toward her, simply placing it where she could reach it if she wished. The faint glow from her skin cast soft blue reflections across the tools, turning the room into a quiet landscape of light. She lifted her head slightly, studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read, half suspicion, half bewilderment, and something quieter beneath it, like fragile hope. Outside, the storm roared on, but inside the outpost, a strange calm settled between them, as if the world had paused just long enough for two strangers to breathe the same still air for the first time. The quiet hum of the shelter wrapped itself around Elias and the alien girl as the storm outside deepened, a soft metallic vibration moving through the walls like a slow heartbeat. She kept her back near the corner, her hood still raised, as though removing it would expose something she was not ready to share. Elias moved carefully through the space, adjusting a flickering lantern so the light softened rather than pressed against her eyes. The warm glow stretched across the room, mixing with the faint blue shimmer rising gently from her skin. She watched him do this in silence, her gaze steady but not hostile, more like someone trying to understand why a stranger would choose gentleness in a place where that word had long stopped meaning anything. Elias leaned against the workbench, giving her all the room she needed. "My name is Elias," he said quietly. His voice carried no expectation, only a patient sincerity that settled lightly into the air. She remained still at first, her fingers curling slightly into the fabric near her hands. Then, with a soft breath that sounded almost like surrender, she said, "Selah." Her voice was melodic but faint, as if shaped by a world where words were rarely trusted. Elias nodded, letting her name settle between them. "All right, Selah," he said. "You are safe in here for now." She glanced toward the sealed door, listening to the muted rhythm of the wind pressing against the metal. The way her shoulders eased just a fraction told him she wanted to believe that. Her attention shifted to a shallow dent above her ankle where her clothing had been torn. Elias noticed the way she tried to hide it by shifting her weight again. Without speaking, he reached for a small storage box and set it gently on the bench. Inside were simple supplies, clean cloth, distilled water, and a portable patch meant for minor injuries. He did not offer it to her directly. He just opened the lid and stepped back. For a moment she did not move. Then she took a cautious step forward, her eyes lifted as if asking whether it was truly acceptable. Elias gave a small nod, not pushing her. She reached into the box, her slender fingers brushing lightly against the cloth. The blue glow along her skin brightened for a heartbeat, like a reflex of surprise at the warmth of the fabric against her palm. She dabbed at the injury, careful and quiet. Elias looked away to give her privacy, focusing instead on the soft vibration of the outpost vents behind him. When she finished, she placed the supplies back exactly as she found them, a gesture so precise it felt like respect. "You do not ask questions," she said softly. "Most would." Elias shrugged lightly. "Most do not show up in a storm needing a place to catch their breath." She studied him again with that searching, almost puzzled expression. Her silver eyes reflected the lantern light like mirrored glass, holding more emotion than she allowed her voice to carry. She whispered, "You are different." Elias smiled faintly, the kind that did not reach for gratitude or pride, just quiet acknowledgement. "Maybe," he said. "But right now, you need rest." Selah hesitated, then slowly sank onto a low crate, folding her hands in her lap. Outside, the wind eased just enough for the silence inside to feel clear and still. In that small room, lit by one trembling lantern and the gentle shimmer along her skin, an unspoken understanding settled between them, delicate and real, as if the storm had brought her here on purpose and he had been waiting without realizing it. The storm outside softened into a distant rush, like the world had taken a long breath and was holding it. Inside the shelter, Elias adjusted a loose panel above the lantern to steady its glow, letting the warm light drift gently toward Selah without overwhelming her. She sat quietly on the crate, her hands resting lightly together, her posture alert yet tired in a way she seemed determined not to show. Elias moved with an easy calm, the kind that filled the room without crowding it. He checked the seals around the door, listening for any unusual vibration. The metal felt cool under his fingertips, carrying only the hum of wind, no other footsteps, no distant signs of anyone approaching. When he turned back, he found Selah watching him with that same thoughtful stillness, as if she were trying to understand the rules of a place that did not match the ones she knew. "Is the storm ending?" she asked, her voice soft but steadier than before. "It is slowing," Elias said. "But not enough to step outside yet. You will have time to rest." She lowered her gaze, her shoulders rising slightly with a quiet inhale. The faint shimmer along her skin shifted in brightness, a subtle ebb and flow that reminded him of moonlit water. Elias walked to the workbench and pulled out a small thermal flask. He poured warm water into a metal cup, its surface rippling as the steam drifted upward in a curling line. "This might help," he said, setting the cup on the bench halfway between them. He did not push it toward her. He simply placed it where it was easy to reach. She rose from the crate with slow, measured steps, each movement cautious but purposeful. When her fingers brushed the cup, the steam caught the glow on her skin, turning it into pale silver swirls that faded back into the dimness. She held the cup close, as though she needed the warmth more than she wanted to admit. "You offer things with no demand," she said quietly. "That is unusual." Elias shrugged. "It is just being decent." She tilted her head slightly, studying the cup, the steam, the lantern, and then him. "On my world," she said, "kindness is rarely free. It is often a trade." Elias leaned against the workbench, folding his arms gently across his chest. "Maybe things are different where you come from. But right now you are here. And here, you do not owe me anything." Selah lifted her eyes, the silver in them reflecting the lantern's glow like tiny mirrors. A soft shift of emotion crossed her face, almost too quick to name, but not too quick to feel. Outside, the wind softened again, brushing faintly against the outpost walls. The quiet inside grew warmer, calmer, filled with the gentle sounds of the lantern's flame adjusting and the soft breaths they shared in the stillness. Selah set the cup down and stepped a little closer, not enough to close the distance entirely, just enough to let the warm light touch the edge of her hood. "Elias," she said quietly, shaping his name with careful precision, as if learning its meaning by feel. "If the storm ends, will you allow me to stay a little longer?" Elias looked at her, at the shimmer along her skin, at the exhausted strength in her posture. He nodded once. As long as you need. For the first time, her shoulders eased fully, not from fear but from something gentler, something like trust beginning to take shape in the quiet glow of the shelter. The storm faded into a dull whisper by the time the lantern's glow settled into the walls, leaving the shelter wrapped in a calm that felt almost unreal. Sayla remained near the center of the room, her posture still composed but no longer burdened by the rigid tension she carried when she arrived. Elias adjusted a nearby instrument panel out of habit, the small clicks of the dials filling the space with a gentle rhythm. Sayla watched him with quiet curiosity, the soft shimmer on her skin pulsing in a slow, even pattern, as if reflecting her easing breath. She stepped closer to the workbench, her eyes moving across the scattered tools and spare parts with a kind of focused wonder. Elias noticed the way she tilted her head, examining each item as though she were mapping them to something she understood. "You repair machines," she said, her fingers tracing the air above a set of carefully arranged wiring coils. "I try," Elias replied with a small smile. "Some days they cooperate." She lifted one of the coils gently, turning it between her hands. The faint blue light from her skin cast soft reflections across the copper surface. "Your world uses many separate devices," she said. "You fix them one piece at a time." Elias nodded. "That is how things work out here. One problem at a time." Sayla lowered the coil carefully, placing it back in the exact spot she found it. "On my world, technology moves as one structure," she said. "If one part suffers, the rest adjusts." Elias leaned against the bench, arms relaxed at his sides. "That sounds easier." She shook her head slightly. "It also means nothing is separate. When one thing fails, everything feels it. Even people." The way she said it carried a weight that reached beyond the words. Elias watched her for a moment, sensing there was more beneath her calm tone, but he did not press. Instead, he lifted a folded thermal blanket from a nearby crate. "You should have this for warmth. The temperature will drop when the storm clears." She hesitated only briefly before taking the blanket. Her fingers brushed against the fabric, and a faint, surprised glow brightened along her wrist, as though the warmth startled her. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders, the edges settling lightly over her arms. For the first time since she arrived, she looked almost comfortable. "Elias," she said, her voice soft but steady, "you offer shelter, warmth, and silence without expecting anything. Are all humans like this?" Elias let out a quiet breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "I do not know," he said. "I just know it is right to help someone who needs it." Sayla absorbed his answer in thoughtful silence. Her silver eyes softened, reflecting the lantern's glow as though her gaze carried the light inward. "No one has helped me without question before," she said. "Not in a very long time." Elias stepped toward the control panel near the window slit, checking the readings again. Through the narrow gap, the sky beyond showed hints of clearing, pale bands of color stretching across the horizon. "The storm is almost over," he said quietly. Sayla approached the window as well, standing beside him but leaving a respectful distance between them. The glow from her skin mixed with the faint daylight, creating a calm, cool shimmer that settled softly across the metal floor. For a moment they stood together in silence, listening to the soft hum of the outpost and the easing wind outside, sharing the small, fragile peace that had found them in the middle of a storm neither of them had planned for. The last traces of the storm drifted across the horizon like fading brushstrokes as the outpost settled into a softer quiet, the kind that felt almost fragile after hours of wind pressing against metal walls. Sayla stood near the narrow window slit, her gaze fixed on the shifting colors outside, the blanket still resting around her shoulders. The gentle glow of her skin blended with the early light, creating a cool reflection along the metal panels. Elias checked the monitor beside her, adjusting a loose wire until the small screen flickered into clarity. "Weather is stable now," he said. "The sand will settle in a few minutes." Sayla nodded slowly, but she did not step away from the window. She seemed to be listening to something far beyond the outpost walls, something he could not hear. After a moment, she whispered, "It feels different. Quiet, but not empty." Elias leaned lightly against the console. "Storms make the world sound crowded. When they end, everything feels new again." She turned her head slightly toward him, her eyes carrying a thoughtful brightness. "Your world is loud," she said. "Even in silence." Elias smiled softly at that. I guess that is true. Sayla stepped away from the window, her movements more relaxed than before. She walked toward the center of the room, her steps creating faint echoes in the metal floor. She paused near a low storage crate, letting her fingers glide lightly along its edge. On my world, she said, quiet means safety. It means nothing is searching. Elias understood the weight behind her words, though she did not describe the details. He answered gently, you are safe here, Sayla. She looked at him with a soft, steady expression. I know, she said. I do not feel watched for the first time in many cycles. Her gaze drifted toward the tools on the bench again, drawn to the small, ordinary objects that made up Elias's life. She touched the handle of a worn wrench, turning it just enough for the metal to catch the lantern light. These things, she said, they look simple, but they are shaped by hands with patience. Elias crossed his arms loosely. Things do not last unless you take care of them. Sayla considered that, her eyes reflecting the quiet warmth of the lantern. Is that how humans live? She asked. By fixing what breaks. Elias thought for a moment. Sometimes. Other times we just try our best to make things hold together. Sayla set the wrench down exactly where it had been, her fingertips leaving a faint shimmer of blue light that faded quickly. She stepped closer again, stopping at a respectful distance from him. You showed me kindness, she said, her voice calm but carrying a quiet emotion beneath it. And you asked nothing. That is rare. Elias met her gaze with a steady calm of his own. Kindness is not a trade, he replied. It is just the right thing to do. Sayla folded the blanket closer around her shoulders, the soft fabric gathering near her hands. Where I come from, she said, survival teaches us to question every gesture. Elias nodded. Maybe so. But you can rest here. You do not have to question everything. She took a gentle breath, letting it out slowly, as though settling into a space she had not allowed herself to occupy in a long time. Outside, the first full rays of daylight reached over the dunes, casting a soft golden glow across the outpost. Inside, the mix of warm sunlight and the cool shimmer of Sayla's skin created a quiet harmony that felt fragile, but real. She looked toward the door, then back at Elias, her expression softened by trust that had taken root without either of them naming it. Elias, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, may I stay a little longer before we step outside? Elias nodded once, without hesitation. As long as you need. And in that small shared moment, the calm inside the shelter deepened, not from silence, but from understanding. The air inside the shelter felt still, almost suspended, as Sayla's words settled into the quiet space between them. Elias did not look away from her, his expression steady, his breath calm. The faint hum of the outpost's temperature regulator filled the silence, a soft vibration that made the lantern's glow tremble slightly. Sayla stood only a few steps from him, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a fragile shield. The soft blue shimmer along her skin pulsed in slow waves, betraying a worry she tried to hide. If they find me, she repeated, her voice barely more than a breath, your world will no longer feel untouched by ours. Elias let out a slow exhale. Then we will make sure they do not find you. Her eyes lifted, silver and reflective, carrying a quiet ache. You say that as though it is simple. It is not, Elias admitted. But it is the choice in front of us. Sayla's fingers clenched gently around the fabric near her chest. You trust a stranger, she whispered. Why? Elias shook his head. I do not need a reason to do what feels right. She looked at him with an emotion he could not name, something between disbelief and gratitude. Where I am from, she said, your actions would be considered a bond. A declaration. Elias met her gaze without hesitation. Then let it be whatever it needs to be. For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the faint breeze sighing against the outer wall, a soft reminder of the world waiting beyond the metal shelter. Finally, Sayla stepped closer, not fully closing the distance, but letting her presence settle beside him with quiet intent. There is something you must understand, she said. I did not only escape them. I was chosen before I left. Elias tilted his head slightly. Chosen for what? Sayla took a breath, her shoulders lifting with the weight of a truth she had carried alone for too long. I carry a mark, she said softly. Not one you can see. Not yet. It awakens only when danger nears or when a witness stands beside the one who bears it. Elias listened, calm and open. A witness. Selah nodded. In my culture, a witness is someone who stands near the marked. Someone who becomes part of their fate, whether they intend to or not. Elias absorbed her words with quiet focus. And you think I have become this witness? For the first time since she arrived, Selah looked uncertain, as though she were unsure whether speaking the truth would burden him or free her. Yes, she whispered. When you opened your door during the storm, when you let me inside without question, the mark recognized you. Elias felt no fear, only a deeper understanding of the fragile trust unfolding between them. Then we face whatever comes next together, he said. Selah closed her eyes briefly, the shimmer along her skin brightening with a faint, involuntary glow. When she opened them again, her voice was steady, shaped by a quiet resolve. Elias, she said, there is something else. The mark does not bind lightly. And once awakened, it will call to those who seek me. The lantern flickered, the light drawing soft patterns along the walls as the room tightened around the truth hanging in the air. Selah stepped closer, her voice a gentle tremor. They will come. And they will not stop. Elias did not take a step back. He simply said, in a calm breath that carried more promise than anything she had ever heard, then let them face a world that chooses kindness over fear. And for the first time, Selah's shoulders eased with something that felt like hope. The faint morning light stretched further across the dunes, softening the metallic edges of the outpost walls as a quiet stillness settled over everything. Yet within that calm, something had shifted. Elias felt it first as a subtle pressure in the air, a sensation like the atmosphere holding its breath. Selah stood near the window slit again, her posture steady but her gaze sharpened by awareness. The soft blue shimmer along her skin had taken on a different cadence, glowing in slow, pulsing intervals that carried a silent message, the mark was waking. Elias stepped beside her, not touching her, simply sharing the space with a calm that grounded the air around them. You feel it, he said softly. Selah nodded once. The mark senses movement. Not close. But near enough to stir. Elias glanced at the monitors, though he knew they could not detect anything beyond the human range. The readings showed nothing unusual, only clean air and open horizon. But the tension in Selah's breath told him more than any instrument could. How far? He asked. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the pulsing glow along her skin guide her senses. Several miles, she whispered. But distance does not change intention. Elias leaned against the console, grounding himself in the familiar feel of metal beneath his hands. He was not a soldier. He had no training for whatever might come from her world. And yet, he felt no urge to step back, no desire to withdraw the shelter he had offered from the moment she stumbled into the outpost. Selah opened her eyes again, her voice holding both worry and something gentler. Elias, you could walk away now. The mark has touched you, but it has not bound completely. If you leave before it strengthens, your fate will not be linked to mine. He let out a slow breath, almost a quiet laugh. I am not going anywhere. Selah looked at him with a kind of disbelief that carried an ache, as if she had never expected loyalty without demand. You should think before you choose, she said. Once the bond is complete, it cannot be undone without cost. Elias turned toward her fully, meeting her silver gaze with steady resolve. You came here needing help. I offered it. That choice does not change because something dangerous is moving out there. Her breathing softened, the shimmer along her arms glowing faintly warmer. On my world, she said, few choose danger for another. Elias shook his head lightly. This is not about choosing danger. It is about choosing you. Selah's breath caught, the faint glow along her skin brightening in a quiet, involuntary pulse. Elias, she whispered, the mark recognizes intention. If you say such things with truth, it will hear you. Then let it hear me, he replied. I am not afraid of being your witness. For a long moment, Selah said nothing. She simply watched him, her expression shifting slowly, layer by layer, from uncertainty to disbelief to a fragile, emerging trust. Then the mark reacted. A soft pulse of light moved along her skin, not bright, but unmistakably alive. The air around them warmed, just a fraction, as if acknowledging a choice that had finally taken shape. Sayla inhaled sharply, steadying herself. "The bond is nearly complete," she said. "Once it settles, those who seek me will sense it more clearly. But it will also protect us in ways I cannot fully explain." Elias nodded. "Then let it settle." Sayla stepped closer, her voice low, filled with meaning she could not yet speak aloud. "When the mark chooses a witness," she said, "it does not bind them to serve. It binds them to stand beside." Elias's tone was gentle but firm. "Then that is exactly what I will do." The pulsing light along her skin softened again, but its warmth lingered in the space between them. Outside, the dunes shifted under the morning sun, and the air carried a faint tremor of something approaching, still distant but drawing nearer with every quiet breath. Inside the shelter, the bond between them settled like a silent promise neither of them had expected, but both had begun to accept. The morning light spread across the dunes in soft bands as the shelter settled into a quiet so complete it felt like the world was holding its breath. Sayla stood near the door, her hand resting lightly on the metal frame, the soft shimmer of the mark pulsing along her skin in a steady, gentle rhythm. Elias watched her from a few steps away, sensing the shift in the air before she spoke. "They are closer," she said calmly, not with fear, but with acceptance. "The mark feels their movement more clearly now." Elias nodded, adjusting the device panel beside him out of habit, even though he knew nothing he did there would change what was coming. He stepped closer to her, stopping at her side, his presence steady and unforced. "Whatever happens," he said, "you will not face it alone." Sayla turned slightly, her silver eyes lifting to meet his. The faint light around her skin brightened in a slow wave, as though responding to the quiet truth in his voice. "Elias," she said softly, "in my culture, when a witness stands beside the marked willingly, they become more than a companion. They become a keeper of truth. A guardian of what was seen and felt." Elias absorbed her words with a calm that surprised even him. "Then I will keep your truth," he said. "All of it." Her breath trembled gently, and something in her expression eased, as though she had been waiting an entire lifetime for someone to speak those words with sincerity. Outside the shelter, the first distant shimmer of movement crossed the dunes, nothing more than a ripple in the light, but enough for Sayla to sense. She did not step back. Instead, she lifted her hand slightly, palm turned upward, as if feeling the air shift around them. "The mark is completing the bond," she whispered. "Once it settles, nothing can separate witness from bearer, not distance, not silence, not fear." Elias remained beside her, grounded and calm. "Then let it settle," he said again. A soft hum filled the air, not from the outpost machinery, but from the mark itself. The glow along Sayla's arm's end neck spread into a gentle halo, barely visible in the sunlight but unmistakably alive. The light did not reach Elias directly, but it reflected softly against his skin, warming the space between them like a shared breath. Sayla closed her eyes as the glow concentrated at the center of her chest, pulsing once, then again, each pulse slower and deeper than the last. When she opened her eyes, the silver in them held a new depth, as if the mark had awakened a part of her she had kept hidden even from herself. "Elias," she said softly, "it is done. You are my witness." The words carried no weight of ownership, only a recognition of what already existed, a bond shaped not by demand, but by choice. Elias exhaled slowly, the moment settling into him like a quiet truth. "Then we walk this path together," he said. Sayla looked out across the dunes again, where the distant shapes moved like shifting shadows, still far but growing more defined with each breath. Yet for the first time, she did not step away or brace herself. She stood with a calm steadiness that mirrored Elias's own. The mark shimmered faintly, warming the air between them with a silent promise. "Whatever they come for," she whispered, "they will not understand why I chose to stand with you." Elias glanced at her, his voice low and sure. "Then let them learn." A soft wind brushed across the dunes, carrying the quiet sound of approaching steps from far beyond human sight. Sayla lifted her chin slightly, her posture no longer shaped by fear, but by quiet resolve. Elias stood beside her, unwavering. And in the stillness before the world shifted, the two of them shared a silence filled with meaning, one shaped not by the danger approaching, but by the choice they had already made together.